Charlotte was a beautiful girl from a noble family, but her life was filled with horrors since her family hated her, which forced her to face humiliations all her life. She continued to try and win her family's love, but everything was in vain. But one day her family crossed all the lines and accused her of treason against the crown, which also broke her engagement with her fiancé. This was the straw that broke the camel's ass, as Charlotte decides to escape the prison which she called home and starts running in the forest. The palace guards immediately chase her deeper into the forest, where she ends up entering the forbidden part of the jungle where demons are said to roam free. She spots a huge, scary-looking mansion in the middle of the woods and decides to run towards it for safety, but ends up slipping and falling on the ground unconscious. Unaware of all this, a black and white-haired boy named Alan, who is also the owner of the scary mansion, wakes up and reads the newspaper, only to find out about a disgraced noble woman who has gone missing in this part of the woods. He wonders how stupid a person will have to be to enter the forbidden demonic part of the forest, when he suddenly senses a strange presence near him and decides to investigate. Not far from the mansion, he finds a collapsed girl lying unconscious on the ground, and to his surprise, it turns out to be Charlotte, the same noble girl mentioned in the news. As he picks her up in his arms, a group of soldiers from the Neros kingdom surround him from all sides. Before Alan could even talk, one of the soldiers rushes forward and swings his sword at. But Alan calmly avoids the attack using simple illusionary magic. The soldiers are surprised by this and decide to talk it over as they ask Alan to hand over the girl, as she is a criminal who has to be presented before the royal family. Alan is a true Sigma and refuses to give her up as he doesn't believe in kings and queens. But this really angers the soldiers as they charge at him, completely unaware of what kind of a monster Alan is. In an instant, Alan uses his ice-bind magic, causing the soldiers to drop on the ground, unable to move, while he casts another spell, which erases their memories and replaces them with an alternate memory where they never find Alan or the noble girl. The soldiers head back towards the palace in a daze, and after some time, Charlotte wakes up in the mansion, confused about where she is when she spots Alan. Alan offers him tea and asks him how she ended up there in the forest. She claims that she is the fiancée of Prince Cecil, the second prince of the Neros kingdom. But one day, Prince Cecil called her to a public gathering and accused her of treason. Nobody believed her when she tried to defend herself, and she was exiled for the evil deeds she had never committed. Alan carefully listens about her traumatizing past and confronts her. She then thanks Alan for taking care of her and asks to leave. But Alan asks her whether she knows anything about cleaning and offers her a job as a live-in maid. Charlotte refuses the offer, so he decides to tell her a made-up emotional story about how he was once in a party of adventurers, but was betrayed when his friends threw him into a group of monsters to try and open a seal of the magical temple. He tells her that he knows the pain of being alone, which is why he cannot let her go just like that. Charlotte is smarter than she looks though, and thanks him again before refusing his generous offer, saying that she is a criminal and hiring her would only cause problems for him. Alan still refuses to give up, and as a final move, he places a death curse on his own heart. He tells her that he will only lift it if she agrees to stay, leaving her with no choice but to accept just to save his life. After that, they start cleaning, and Charlotte ends up scrubbing the entire mansion until it looks brand new. Alan is amazed by her skill, but soon realizes that she had only held the title of a noble, while in reality, she had been treated like a servant. After a bit of casual chat, she asks him for her next task, but Alan tells her that she is free to do whatever she wants until dinner. He shows her the library, where she can read good books, and gives her permission to stay there, but strictly tells her not to disturb him under any condition. After that, he goes back to work as he starts checking research papers, as he is very well known in the research community for finding even the smallest errors in any research. He starts striking out papers with a red pen, till the papers start spitting blood. By evening, he gets done with his work and turns around only to find Charlotte sitting on the floor, quietly counting grains out of boredom. Confused by this, he asks whether she doesn't have any hobbies, but Charlotte replies that she only knows how to do household chores and nothing else. Realizing that her life has been nothing but tragic till now, he decides to give her a crash course on everything that the world has to offer. He pauses for a moment to decide his next move before leaving the mansion. After a while, he returns carrying various items and gifts from the market. He announces that today marks her first lesson in naughtiness, beginning with food. He displays all the junk food and bottles of wine he secured for dinner and explains that he sold his magical equipment to get them. Charlotte refuses to eat, saying that a proper dinner is healthy for the body. But Alan sweet-talks her and, as her employer, orders her to eat the cake. She takes a bite and asks him to join her. Alan replies that he does not like sweets. Charlotte then asks why he bought so many, and Alan tells her that he bought them all for her. Hearing that, Charlotte falls silent. A moment later, tears start dropping from her eyes. She thanks Alan for everything, saying that she is truly happy, as it is the first time she has experienced something like this. Alan gently wipes her tears and tells her that this is just the beginning. From now on, he will teach her all the naughtiness the world has to offer. The next morning, he looks into his notebook of naughty plans which he worked on the whole night, such as summoning fluffy monsters, crafting magical equipment, dumping any foe into living hell, and other useless. But soon he realizes that only a deranged person like him would enjoy these dumb tasks and throws the notebook into the dustbin. Frustrated, he decides to get some sleep, but while moving towards his bedroom, he ends up running into Charlotte, who bids him good morning. Alan, however, tells her that he is heading off to sleep since he pulled an all-nighter, but stops when he notices a broom in her hand. He asks why is she roaming around with a broom since she just cleaned the mansion yesterday, but Charlotte replies that she wants to be useful to him and keep the place clean and tidy. At this point, he realizes that despite being the nobility, she must have been treated like a servant all her life. While he was lost in his thoughts, he suddenly hears a familiar voice from the door and walks over, only to find Charlotte staring at Mia, the girl who delivers mails and packages to Alan in this forest. Mia notices Alan and addresses him as the Demon Lord, which scares the out of Charlotte, who starts shivering. Alan immediately tells her not to worry as he is just an ordinary wizard. But since he doesn't like talking to a lot of people, they think that he is a demon of some sort. Mia notices that Charlotte is new here, and after looking at her, she realizes that Charlotte is the girl from the news who committed treason. Charlotte gets scared, but Mia tells her not to worry as she won't reveal this information to anyone. After that, Mia hands Alan his package while he gives her a different item to sell in the city. Mia claims that his item is in high demand and suggests that he should move to the city to run a business, but Alan refuses, claiming that he likes living peacefully in the forest. After that, Alan asks Mia what else can her company deliver, and like a typical blood-sucking salesman, she pulls out a catalog from her ass and hands it to him. Alan hands over the catalog to Charlotte and tells her to order anything she likes. Charlotte has never experienced this before and is overjoyed as she quickly orders everything that catches her eye. A few days later, Miyacha finally comes back with the parcels and hands it over to Charlotte, before delivering a secret wooden box to Alan. He opens the box and takes a punching bag out of it, which confuses Charlotte, but Alan claims this is the second naughty thing of the day. He gives Charlotte a pair of boxing gloves and tells her to go crazy as this should release all the stress inside her. To make it more cathartic, he puts a photo of Charlotte's fiancé on the punching bag, but Charlotte refuses to do anything like that. Alan decides to give her a pep talk, claiming that she needs to let out her anger, but Charlotte replies that she is not angry to begin with. Instead, she only feels bad for the prince for having somebody of low status as his fiancé. Alan realizes that her feelings run deeper than he thought. He feels frustrated, as he had already planned to attack the Neras kingdom with Charlotte and then live happily together after defeating her enemies. But now all his plans are in vain, as Charlotte has already started blaming herself for things that aren't even her fault. Mia suggests that Alan give Charlotte some space, but sitting around and waiting is not Alan's style. He walks up to Charlotte and asks her to punch him instead of the punching bag. Charlotte turns down this sadistic request, but Alan takes her hand in his control using magic and punches himself so hard that blood starts dripping. Charlotte runs toward him and asks why he did that. Alan explains that to help her release her frustration he had to do so. He reassures her she doesn't need to hide her feelings anymore while she's with him. He fixes his face with magic, but Charlotte gets upset and tells him not to do that again. As she's about to cry, Alan quickly promises he'll never do it again. Then he hands the punching bag back to Mia and apologizes for the trouble. Mia just smiles and says that it might be a hassle now, but soon he'll be needing things like a double bed, baby stuff, rings, and more. The next morning, Alan and Charlotte sit down for a cup of tea. Out of nowhere, the window swings open and a beautiful girl jumps in. Charlotte looks surprised and asks her who she is, but before the girl can answer, Alan jumps in and introduces her as Iruka Crawford, who is his younger sister. Alan tells Charlotte that his parents passed away when he was young, and after that, the Crawford family took him in. Then he turns to Iruka and asks how she even found this mansion. Iruka just laughs and says she followed rumors about a strange demon lord lurking in the area and kept chasing those stories until they led her straight here. Iruka teases Alan about Charlotte as her girlfriend, but Alan tells her Charlotte's whole story. Iruka seriously listens to the whole story and points out Alan as dumb for making a girl do random eating and punching instead of actually doing naughty things. Iruka claims to take care of Charlotte from now onwards to teach her naughty things. Alan refuses to do so and claims himself to be the best-suited teacher to Charlotte. This sparks a controversy between them, and they decide to have a competition for Charlotte's custody. They head towards the market and Alan uses his illusionary magic to change Charlotte's hair color. They disguise her in robes so that nobody can recognize her in the wanted posters. Their first challenge is to pick a suitable dress for Charlotte. Iruka finds a pretty dress and sends Charlotte into the trial room. While Charlotte was inside, Alan and Iruka secretly talk about how they can find culprits who framed Charlotte. Between their conversation, Charlotte called Iruka for help with tying the lace at the back of the dress. Iruka goes inside to help her, but she notices several marks and bruises on Charlotte's back. She gets shocked and secretly shows those marks to Alan too. Alan heals her wounds with magic without telling her, but he was raging with anger in his heart. He realizes someone in the kingdom must have hated Charlotte so much that they had to go to such an extent of harming her. Both Alan and Iruka seriously decide to find out all the culprits in the mansion who made Charlotte suffer so much. After regaining his composure, Alan randomly picks a dress for Charlotte. The whole group goes numb when the dress turns out to be a bikini and Iruka wins the round. Later, in the street, Alan introduces shopping as another naughty thing they can do. He picks a stuffy animal from the shop, but nobody likes it. Then he picks another one, then another, but this choice gets rejected every time. Iruka comments on his choice to be trashy, and a sibling war strikes out between them. In the afternoon, they took a break for lunch in a restaurant. Charlotte suggested Alan not to overspend money on her, but Alan asked her to chill. He states that spending a little wouldn't hurt if she gets a little experience about the real world from it. Iruka throws a taunt at Alan over his choice once again, and the war begins. After a while, Alan keeps up a smiling front on the outside. He strengthens his resolve and decides he won't lose Charlotte to his little sister, no matter what. Once again, they head out for shopping after lunch. On the way, Iruka spots a magical wheelchair and completely loses herself in its design. Alan notices her absence and takes Charlotte with him to a shop. He gently places a beautiful hair clip in her hair and Charlotte gets shy. During their lovey-dovey moment, a group of thugs suddenly appear from behind and push Charlotte. They don't apologize and instead start causing a ruckus in the market. Alan maintains his calm and tries to talk over it, but they begin insulting him. The thugs take it to another level, and one of them asks for Charlotte for a night. As a repayment, he tries to touch Charlotte inappropriately, but Alan grabs his hand in midair and breaks it into two. The other thug charges toward Alan with a magical sword, but Alan freezes his sword and knocks him out with a single punch. Alan still rages to kill them, but suddenly becomes numb as he recalls Charlotte's condition for no violence. He quickly apologizes to her, but Charlotte brushes it off as no big deal. She tells him that fighting is bad, but since he did it to protect her, it does not count. She thanks him for protecting her, and Alan replies that she does not need to worry about anything as long as they are together with each other. From a distance, Iruka watches the whole scene and concedes victory to Alan this time. She murmurs to herself that when it comes to love and romance, Alan is a better match for Charlotte than she is. Just when they thought everything is over, the leader of the thugs appears, forcing Charlotte to hide behind Alan while he watches the man carefully. Without hesitation, Alan walks straight over and asks him whether he is Megath. The man agrees and Alan gets a nostalgia listening to the name. But out of nowhere, Megath claims he doesn't know anyone like Alan and punches him. Alan remains unharmed and tells Megath that perhaps his memory is weak. He reintroduces himself as Alan Crawford from the Magical University. Megath recalls this name and starts in his pants. He falls at Alan's feet and greets him as the Great Demon Lord. He begs for mercy, and everyone around watches the scene in astonishment. The minions from Megath's gang appear and ask him not to kneel down. They step forwards to take care of Alan, but Megath grows angry and strikes them down. He warns everyone not to trouble the Great Demon Lord any further, or they may face unknown consequences. Iruka steps forward and explains to Charlotte that her father is the chairperson of the largest magical university in the world. As Alan has been intelligent since childhood, he graduated from Magical University at the age of 12. From then on, he becomes a teacher in the university and earns his nickname of Great Demon Lord. The next day, Mia and Iruka visit Alan at his mansion and find Alan at the door sitting with a lame face. Iruka guesses that there must be something between him and Charlotte, and he nods his head. The previous night, he tries to give some money to Charlotte, which she refused to take. Alan claims it as her salary and asks her not to hesitate while accepting it. After a little push, Charlotte accepts the money but asks him permission for shopping alone. At first, Alan refuses her request, but eventually gives in when she keeps insisting with a cute puppy face. Now, in the present, he is regretting his decision of letting her go alone. Mia and Iruka listen to his whole story and exchange glances with each other. They give him the idea of following Charlotte from the shadows, and he agrees to do so. After some time, Charlotte goes to the market and the three of them follow her like stalkers. Charlotte follows the map given to her by Alan and Alan feels proud over it. After some time, Mia points out that Charlotte is heading to the deserted area in the city full of criminals. She warns that after another left turn, Charlotte will end up in the turf of the Serpent Gang. Alan thinks for a while and prepares to leave the area with an excuse of urgent work. He asks Iruka and Mia to take care of Charlotte until he returns and disappears into the shadows. After a left turn, Charlotte reaches the deserted area and tries to figure out where she is. Everyone gets scared as the situation looks bad and the gang members surround Charlotte. Mia and Iruka take an instance to defend her, but to their surprise, they all cheerfully welcome her with flowers and drums instead of attacking her. Everyone gets surprised by this and tries to figure out what's going on. Soon, Alan returns and Iruka asks him where he has been till now. He smirks and replies that he has already given a very peaceful lesson to Serpent Fang and told them the consequences of messing with Charlotte. Charlotte notices bruises on bodies of gang members like someone gave them a good beating. She asks them if they are fine and offers them a healing potion. The group of goons break down into tears and praise Charlotte like a goddess. They decided to change their way of living and live honestly from now onwards. Charlotte asks them if they are friends of Alan, and they agree as they were already aware of the consequences of disappointing the Demon Lord. They cross-question Charlotte about her relationship with the Demon Lord, which makes Alan excited from the alley. Charlotte describes Alan as her master and adds that they regularly do naughty things together. Everyone is left in shock, while Alan rushes to clear up the misunderstanding. Iruka mentions that they may get spared here, but there are many other areas further in the city where Charlotte might get lost and encounter gangs. Alan grins over this and declares that it means he has to take control over this area. Then after that, Iruka and Mika trail Charlotte while Alan beats the out of all the gangs from the city. Suddenly, the city becomes peaceful and Charlotte continues her secret shopping. In the evening, Charlotte finishes her shopping and meets Alan, Miyacha, and Charlotte near the market. Charlotte tells him that everyone is praising Alan in the street, as yesterday he beat down those goons and their boss Megath, which made the streets safe and peaceful. Alan asks Charlotte about her shopping, and she replies that it went smoothly. She presented 2 gifts to Miyacha and Iruka, which were trending in the town at that time. Both of them thanked Charlotte for doing this for them from her first salary. Alan makes a bad face and asks Charlotte if she has something for him. Charlotte replies that she tries to find gifts for him, but in the end she was unable to find something which suited Alan as she is still unaware of what Alan likes. Alan cried in frustration that he would have been happy with a stamp, postcard, flag, train photo, mole, and even a roadside flower if it was from her. Charlotte apologizes to him and says that she is sorry as she did not realize it earlier. She took Alan's robe in her hand, which was dirty and torn. She asks him to at least let her mend it as a token of apology, and Alan agrees. In the night, Charlotte reads a book suggested by Alan and praises it. She talks about the mention of magical academies and different countries in the book. Alan asks her if there are other places in the book she wants to check out. Alan tells her that she just needs to tell him the place and he will visit there tomorrow. She hesitates to tell him, so Alan blackmails her again to tell him otherwise he will put a curse on his own heart. Charlotte tries to stop her from doing so, and both of them come into a compromising position. Suddenly, the door bangs and Miyacha enters the house. Alan asks her why she came here even though she has already sent all the mails to him. Miyacha hands a packet to Alan and says that it is a present for both of them. There are tickets to the Unoha region inside this packet for 2 people. The next day, Alan and Charlotte head to the Unoha region in a private horse wagon. On their way, Charlotte notices the beautiful plains and praises the amazing scenery of the region. Miacha and Iruka hide in the hills and follow both of them, as they are the ones who planned that surprise of their tickets. After a long ride, both of them reach the Unoha resort where a mermaid greets them. The mermaid receptionist checks their tickets and welcomes them on their honeymoon. Alan tells her that they are not on any honeymoon, so the receptionist assumes again that they must be lovers and welcomes them lovers. Both Charlotte and Alan become tomato red upon listening to this, and Alan clarifies that they are not lovers either. The receptionist looks towards them in confusion and tells them that their reservation is already there as couples. She opens the packet given to Alan by Miacha and shows them 2 special tickets for couples inside the packet. Alan curses Miyachi in his mind while Miyachi and Iruka enjoy this commotion hiding behind the reception desk. As the package was very expensive and already booked, both of them finally decided to use it as a couple for one day. After exploring the resort for a while, the mermaid guides them to the hot spring. The giant entrance of the hot spring leaves both of them in awe. The guide explains the specialty of those hot springs to them and asks if they bought their swimsuits. Alan asks her why they need swimsuits. She explains to them that it is a mixed bath for both men and women, and they need swimsuits for that. She further tells them that they have various cute rental swimsuits here and escorts Charlotte to the girls' section. Alan bought a swimsuit for himself and waited for Charlotte outside the waters. He thought about what would happen when he saw Charlotte in a swimsuit. She reaches one of his smartest conclusions and decides that he will stop his own heart if it comes to the worst of the worst. Suddenly, Charlotte enters, and after seeing her, he says to himself that now he don't need to stop his heart as it has already stopped. Charlotte asks him if the swimsuit looks good on her, and Alan compliments him with an embarrassed red face. Charlotte praises him and says that he looks good in a swimsuit, and finally Alan regains his composure. Both of them enter the spring and start enjoying services one by one. In the evening, both of them shared a moment alone in a hot spring. They soak in hot springs surrounded by rocks and enjoy the beautiful scenery of sunset. As they were shocking in the hot spring, the maid came with an ice cream. Charlotte asks Alan about it, and Alan explains that he is the one who ordered that ice cream. He tells Charlotte that it is supposed to be a surprise for her, and it is a naughty thing that they can only do in a hot spring. He uses his immortal ice magic over the ice cream so that it does not melt due to the heat of the hot spring. Suddenly others also start ordering ice cream, and it becomes a total chaos there. After a short while, as soon as their ice cream gets delivered, some of the children come to Alan and ask him to use that ice magic on their ice cream too. Alan says that today he is in a good mood, so he accepts their request and uses immortal ice magic on all the cups of ice cream. Later in the dining hall, Alan asks the guide about other interesting sights there. The guide suggests to them many sights worth seeing, including divine sports, beaches, and a hill where they can observe Fenriers. Charlotte asked Alan about Fenriers, and Alan replied that they are magical creatures which are very noble and peaceful. Before they can decide to go there, the guide suggests to them that the Fenriers will not be there as this is the mating season. After dinner, both of them enter the room and move toward bed. Alan suddenly freaked out as he notices the bed is decorated with lovey-dovey romantic couple things. He suddenly called the room service and asked them to remove that extra decoration. Outside the room, Miyachi and Iruka spy on them using hearing aids and expected something not to happen as they share the same bed. Meanwhile, in the room, their guide removes the decoration but tells them that this is a special custom-made bed. When 2 people sleep on it, they can watch whatever dream they want to watch. Both of them went to sleep but were unable to sleep because of overcomfort of bed. Alan asks Charlotte what dream she wants to see. She replies that she wants to dream about her mother who passed away a long time ago. She asks Alan for help to sleep, and Alan uses his light hypnotic magic on Charlotte. After Charlotte sleeps peacefully, Alan starts gazing at her beautiful sleeping beauty. He notices her white skin, cute face, and blonde hair, but suddenly he feels something in his body. He understands the heat of the moment and uses a high-level spell of deadly force on himself. Because of that, both he and those 2 stalkers outside the room fall asleep in a second. The next morning, Alan and Charlotte wakes up and Alan asks her about her dream. Tears flow out in Charlotte's eyes, and she thanks Alan for that peaceful sleep, because of which she was able to have a very good time with her late mother in her dream. Later that day, both of them visited a zoo that Charlotte had wanted to see for a long time. The zoo was filled with various animals, birds, and magical creatures. Alan picked up a map and asked Charlotte where she wanted to go. She pointed to a picture, and Alan understood she wanted to visit the petting zoo. She agreed with Alan and told him that when she was young, she had seen it in a book and had wanted to visit ever since. Alan declared that they would definitely go, and told Charlotte to ask for anything she wanted. She hesitated at first, but Alan launched into his usual over-the-top act, pretending to curse his own heart. She asked Alan to wear matching ones with her, and although he was clearly embarrassed, he still put them on with a reluctant smile. As soon as Charlotte entered the petting zone, all the magical creatures gathered around her and began playing with her. Even those that had been far away started running toward her, eager to be petted. The crowd at the zoo watched in awe, wondering who she was, amazed by how popular she seemed among the magical creatures. After a while, Alan and Charlotte sat on a bench to rest. Charlotte thanked him warmly for giving her such a wonderful experience. Alan's mind drifted back to the moment in the forest when Charlotte had been unconscious, surrounded by magical creatures. That memory sparked a theory that Charlotte might be a natural magical creature tamer, something she herself wasn't even aware of yet. He explained to her that a magical tamer is someone who can communicate with magical creatures. Even at his level, Alan admitted he could only speak with lower-tier magical beasts. Yet Charlotte had done it instinctively, with no training at all, which meant she might actually be an incredibly powerful tamer. He wondered aloud if a trained tamer of her talent could go so far as to tame high-level magical beasts like Fenrir's. Just then, a zoo guide came running toward them, asking for help. She led them to the control center, where other magical tamers were already gathered. A moment later, the zoo director entered the room and asked Alan if he was the son of the Crawfords. Recognizing him, the director said he had seen Alan once when he was a guest lecturer at the Magical University. The staff looked visibly relieved to know that someone from the Crawford family was present. Alan asks the director about the problem, and the director leads him into a room. Inside, there's an injured Fenrir cub that had been separated from its parents and shot down by poachers. The director explains that it's the first time they've managed to capture a Fenrir, and because of that, they have no idea how to communicate with it. The creature refuses to let anyone near, making it impossible for the staff to use healing magic. Alan tries to approach the cub, but it growls and lashes out, attempting to break out of the cage to attack him. Before anyone can think of a solution, an assistant rushes in and informs them that the mother of the Fenrir cub is approaching fast. The staff suspects she's a high-ranking Fenrir, one powerful enough to destroy an entire city. They agree that returning the cub in its current state would only fuel the mother's rage. Alan comes up with a plan. He tells them that he will hold off the incoming Fenrirs to buy enough time for everyone to evacuate the zoo. But before he can act, Charlotte steps in and begs him to let her try taming the Fenrir cub first. At first, Alan and the others are doubtful even for someone as gifted as Charlotte. Taming a Fenrir is no easy task. But Charlotte keeps insisting, and eventually, Alan gives in and tells her to do her best to convince the cub to accept treatment. Meanwhile, Alan suddenly appears behind Miacha and Eruka, who are relaxing in the swimming area. Both of them jump in surprise, looking around in panic. Alan calmly tells them he already knew they were there, and now their presence might actually be useful. Alan then casts a barrier over Unoha Resort and the zoo. To buy Charlotte more time, he heads straight to the valley where the Fenrirs are gathering. He uses his ice bind magic to freeze all the cubs in place. But before he can regroup, a colossal, mountain-sized mother Fenrir attacks and swallows him whole. Inside her mouth, Alan activates his defensive shield and casts a paralyze spell, forcing the mother to spit him out. He tries to communicate, but she continues to strike at him, landing a few hits and leaving him bruised. Realizing words aren't working, Alan prepares to use high-level magic, but before he can activate it, a magical creature named Hell Capybara appears and stops him. Capybara tells Alan that his real mission should be to rescue Lady Charlotte, who he claims is being forced to live by Alan's side. When Alan demands to know how he even knows Charlotte, the capybara begins his story. He explains that he once snuck out of the zoo and wandered across different lands. One day, in the forest, he found Charlotte unconscious and wanted to help her. But before he could act, Alan appeared and took her away. Later, he heard rumors about Charlotte but refused to believe them. From that moment on, he started observing her and eventually decided that removing Alan was the only way to truly protect her. Suddenly, the capybara attacks Alan and accuses him of being lazy. In the middle of the fight, it claims Alan does nothing but idle around with Charlotte and never makes an effort to truly protect her. Alan demands to know what its plan is. The capybara declares that it will unleash its hidden powers, defeat Alan, and destroy the Nera's kingdom. It claims the kingdom is the root of Charlotte's sorrow, and it will reduce it to ashes and flood it with rivers of blood. It casts a powerful spell to melt the ice binding the Fenriers. Alan suddenly finds himself surrounded by both the Fenriers and the capybara. He knows the odds are against him, and fears he may not make it out alive. But with no other choice, he stands his ground ready to face them all in a Jon Snow-style one-against-all stance. Just as the Fenriers close in, Charlotte arrives, leading a large army of magical beasts from the zoo. She steps forward, tames the Fenrir cub, and heals it. The cub returns to its mother, and the two begin to communicate. Alan watches in awe. In such a short time, Charlotte managed to tame a high-level magical beast and understand it. He asks if she knows what they're saying. Charlotte nods and explains that the mother Fenrir had mistaken Alan for a poacher, and that the false impression came from the capybara's lie. Everyone realizes the capybara had framed Alan from the start. The capybara, still unrelenting, demands that Charlotte leave Alan immediately and come with him. It claims Alan will only bring her misfortune and lead her down a dark path. But Charlotte refuses. She says Alan is the reason she can finally live in peace. Enraged, the capybara lunges at her. Alan jumps in, and the two clash in a one-on-one fight. The capybara unleashes a wave of fierce flame magic, but Alan counters with a dark magic punch that sends it flying. The creature crashes to the ground and finally admits defeat. Looking up at Alan, it says it now understands the strength of his resolve and adds that the cat ears still sitting on his head are proof of it. Alan instinctively reaches for his head, feels the ears, and turns red with embarrassment. Later, they return to the resort, where the owner thanks them for saving everyone from the Fenriers. As they prepare to leave, a pack of Fenriers appears to see them off. Charlotte, still thoughtful, asks what happened to the real poachers who had attacked the Fenriers. Just then, Miyacha and Iruka show up with the poachers tied up in ropes. Charlotte asks why they're here, and they casually claim it's a coincidence. The poachers show no guilt, so Alan hands them over to the Fenriers to let them decide how justice should be served. The Fenrir cub that Charlotte tamed seems eager to go with her, so she turns to Alan and asks for permission. Alan gently asks if the cub is truly okay with living far from its family. Before Charlotte can answer, the zoo guide steps in and explains that it would only take a Fenrir about an hour to travel from the Groll region where Alan's mansion is located. Hearing that, Alan agrees and welcomes the cub as a new member of their family. Later, while riding in a horse-drawn wagon, Alan notices Hell Capybara sitting with them. Surprised, he asks what it's doing there. The capybara replies that, as a token of apology, it has appointed itself as Lady Charlotte's bodyguard. It turns to Charlotte and says that it's part of her family now and that it loves her. At the mention of the word family, Alan grows visibly annoyed and tells the capybara to go back to the zoo. Back at the mansion, Charlotte takes a peaceful walk in the garden with Lou, the Fenrir cub. Ghostsu, the capybara, comments that ever since Lou joined their family, Alan has barely had time to spend with Charlotte. Alan agrees, but quickly snaps back, asking how long the capybara plans to freeload in his mansion. While walking, Alan notices a big change in Charlotte. She has become much more positive compared to when she first arrived. These days, she spends most of her time studying and researching ways to tame magical creatures. Eventually, Alan begins teaching her how to tame them properly. Charlotte puts what she learns into practice by placing a magical seal on Lou and giving a command. Lou performs the task flawlessly. Alan is surprised at how quickly she's progressed and praises her for being able to bond with a Fenrir in such a short time. Ghostsu also comments on her natural talent for beast communication. Curious, Charlotte asks about it. The capybara explains that beast communication is a form of magic that translates magical creatures' language into human speech. She then asks how Ghostsu can use it, and he reveals that he taught himself. He also shares that his name is Ghostsu, and that he's lived long enough to learn human language as well. Encouraged, Charlotte asks Alan if she can try using beast communication on the Fenriers. She casts the spell on Lou, but it seems to vanish mid-air. Alan reassures her that it's okay. Beast communication is a high-level spell, and it takes time to master. But just then, Lou speaks clearly in human language and calls Charlotte Mommy. Stunned and overjoyed, Charlotte starts playing with Lou in the garden. Watching them, Ghostsu smiles and says Charlotte truly is something special when it comes to taming magical creatures. In the afternoon, Alan creates a special bathing area for Lou as a gift for being able to speak. Alan asks Lou to enter the bathtub and enjoy himself. But before Lou can step in, Ghosttsu barges into the scene like the freeloader he always is. Alan asks what he is doing there, and Ghosttsu replies like a complete idiot, saying that he is part of the family too. Alan tells him the bath is only for humans and Fenriers, but Ghosttsu protests and accuses him of discrimination against capybaras. He warns that if he is not allowed in, then he has no choice. Out of nowhere, he activates some weird technique called the Hell Forest Rat-style secret technique of shimmering water. Light bursts out of him like he is about to ascend into heaven or something. When the light fades, Ghosttsu has transformed into a beautiful girl. Now, in his female form, he casually joins the bath like nothing ever happened, and somehow, everyone starts having fun together. Later on, Charlotte and Alan sit on a bench and talk about the mansion and the garden. Alan says the previous owner never really used the garden and left it completely untouched. Charlotte asks about the former resident, and Alan explains that an elf used to live here 30 years ago. She was a loner and avoided the town, but one day, she just vanished. There are still rumors floating around. Some say she fell off a cliff during a failed experiment. Others claim she was eaten by a monster. And then there are those who believe her body was taken over by mushrooms after committing some kind of magical taboo. Alan admits that thanks to those creepy rumors, he was able to buy the mansion at a dirt cheap price. Suddenly, Charlotte freaks out when she sees mushrooms floating in the bathtub. They both rush over and find mushrooms coming out of the water source underground. Before they can make sense of the situation, a girl suddenly pops out of the ground and yells at them for stealing her precious mushrooms. Alan asks who she is, and she introduces herself as Dorothea Grimm Wallenstein. They follow her to the basement and discover that she has been living there this entire time. She asks Alan who he is, and he explains that they live in the mansion upstairs. Dorothea looks at them in disbelief and says that the mansion upstairs belongs to her. After a moment of shock, Alan realizes she is the elf who disappeared 30 years ago. The elf is just as stunned, realizing that 3 entire decades have passed. Ghosttsu suspects that she is a dark elf, and Alan agrees. He explains to Charlotte that dark elves are a rare and elite type of elf. A dark elf can survive just by absorbing magical energy from the air and can go for at least 100 years without eating or drinking. Alan starts to worry. If the previous owner is still alive, then he might be stuck in a legal nightmare over property rights. Trying to keep things peaceful, he asks Dorothea if she would be willing to sell the mansion to him. Dorothea agrees, but on one condition. Alan asks her what the condition is, but she tells him to listen to her story first. She explains that she used to be a writer who worked across different genres. She was popular in the industry and even considered herself a genius. But one day, she tried to write a romance novel and ended up in the worst writer's block of her life. The deadline came closer, but she could not write a single sentence. Since then, she has been hiding from her deadline, living in the basement for the past 30 years. Now, she says her slump might finally be over. She claims that she has found the perfect candidates for her new story. She explains her condition. For the sake of her new novel, she needs both Alan and Charlotte to act lovey-dovey right here and now. After some time, they begin their skit under Dorothea's supervision. During the performance, there comes a scene where Charlotte jumps from the railing. Alan catches her in his arms, and the two lock eyes in a romantic gaze. But Dorothea instantly cuts the scene, annoyed that Alan is using magic to levitate Charlotte instead of holding her physically. She yells at Alan, saying they cannot even flirt properly on their own, so she has prepared a script for them. But even with the script, both of them fail to follow it correctly. She calls it a win-win situation. If they perform the scene properly, Alan gets the mansion, and she gets a story for her novel. Alan says he has to decline the idea, claiming Charlotte must hate it too. It is impossible to flirt with someone who doesn't like you. But Charlotte surprises him by saying that if it is with Alan Sam, then she doesn't mind flirting. Alan loses his calm after hearing that and bangs his head against the wall to cool off. After regaining his composure, he finally agrees to follow the script, but he adds one condition. He will reject anything that goes against public order or morality. Dorothea gives them a fresh script, and they start acting as newlyweds. In the first scene, Alan returns home from work and opens the door. Charlotte, playing his wife, greets him warmly and asks if he would like a bath, dinner, or a piece of her. The moment Alan hears those seductive words, his nose starts bleeding and his soul seems to drift out of his body. Dorothea cuts the scene right away and scolds Alan for passing out so easily. They continue the skit. In the next scene, Charlotte serves dinner to Alan. Following the script, she feeds him with her hands and calls him Al Al. Alan gets excited hearing the nickname, and food shoots out of his mouth. Dorothea cuts the scene again. Alan asks what the hell Al Al is supposed to be. Dorothea explains that since they are newlyweds, they get to use cute nicknames like Al Al and Charlie. After a short break, they move on to scene 2, which is set in a school life situation. Since this scene includes more characters, Dorothea needs a bigger cast. To help her out, Ghostsu volunteers and transforms into his female form. The scene begins with a lone wolf punk named Alan Crawford. One day, his childhood friend Charlotte gets kidnapped by a group of thugs. To save her, Alan charges into enemy territory all by himself. He faces the enemies and demands that they release Charlotte. They refuse and attack him. But Alan defends himself with ease, dodging and blocking every move. Impressed by his strength, the enemies offer him a spot on their team. Alan turns them down cold. When they threaten to hurt Charlotte, Alan unleashes his power and knocks them all out with a single punch. He frees Charlotte, and she thanks him with tears in her eyes. Just as she is about to leave, Alan grabs her hand from behind and pins her against the wall like some dramatic hero. One of the enemies asks Alan who Charlotte is to him and why he risked everything to storm their base. Alan's heart pounds in his chest. With a shaky voice, he says that he is her guardian. Everyone in the room falls silent. Dorothea cuts the scene and sighs. She asks Alan why he goes off script when he is supposed to say that Charlotte is part of his heart. Alan stammers and says he improvised, thinking it sounded better. They take a break, and Dorothea tells them that the next skit will be a Cinderella story. She hands out the script and explains the roles. Alan will play the prince on a white horse. Charlotte will be the unfortunate and mistreated princess. Ghostsu gets the role of the wicked stepmother, while Lou takes on the part of the sorcerer. The scene begins with Charlotte, a girl born from a mistress who gets mistreated every single day. She dreams of going to the royal ball, but her stepmother refuses to let her attend. Just when her hopes start to fade, a mysterious sorcerer appears and takes her to the ball. When they arrive, the prince notices her right away. He is captivated by her presence and asks her for a dance. They move together in perfect rhythm, like they were made for that moment. The lights dim, the music swells, and the scene fades out. In the next part, Charlotte tries to erase the memory of that magical night. But the prince does not forget. He comes looking for her with a hairpin she left behind. He shows it to the stepmother, searching for a girl with the same eyes, and finds Charlotte. The prince asks her to come with him, but she turns him down. She tells him that she is a child of a mistress, and someone like her has no right to live beside royalty. The prince looks her in the eyes and says it does not matter. He promises never to let go of her hand. Charlotte asks what he truly feels for her. Alan tries to express the voice of his heart. But just as the moment grows tender, the wall of the mansion suddenly explodes. A handsome man in a sharp suit walks in through the smoke. He looks straight at Alan and says he senses a strange presence in the room. His eyes sweep across the chaos and land on Dorothea, who is hiding under Lou's blanket. Without hesitation, he ties her up and reveals that he is Dorothea's editor. He says she was supposed to submit a novel 30 years ago, but vanished the day after he asked for a draft. He apologizes to Alan for the damage and hands him a generous amount as compensation. Then, without blinking, he ties Dorothea to the mouth of his dragon and flies off into the sky. The terror known as Dorothea finally comes to an end. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief. But just as they begin to relax, Iruka bursts in and tells Alan that Charlotte's little sister, Natalia, is in serious trouble. Charlotte gets emotional as she remembers how kind Natalia used to be. She was one of the few who never treated her like a maid and used to read storybooks with her. The next morning, Charlotte wakes up and finds herself on a large ship along with Lou and Ghostsu. Iruka and Alan have a conversation on the deck where Iruka tells him Natalia is the legitimate heir of the Evans family. She is her half-sister and is 10 years younger than him, who is also quite fond of Charlotte. Charlotte joins them and thanks Alan for the sleeping spell he cast over her last night. She had a peaceful sleep because of that, with a dream about Natalia. In the meantime, they reach near the island, and Alan recalls that it has been 3 years. Charlotte points towards the highest building and asks whether it is the university. Alan tells her that the building is just the dormitory for students, and this whole island is the Athena Magical University. They disembark from the ship and head towards Crawford's mansion. Charlotte prepares herself mentally for greeting Alan's parents, and Iruka calms her down. She tells her it's no big deal in Charlotte's case, though she is a little worried about her brother. She explains that Alan quit the Magical Academy 3 years ago without telling anybody. He had a big fight with his father and left home. The people of the island still talk about the fight like some folklore. The fight between these two strongest mages lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, causing fierce ruins which are still a sightseeing spot for tourists. As his father is his stepfather in reality, he addresses him as uncle. Alan says that he is still on good terms with his uncle, and they communicate regularly via mail. Charlotte becomes a little envious and tells them that, let alone fight, she never even had a family to begin with. Alan suggests her to build a family-like relationship with Natalia where the two can fight like a real family, and Charlotte nods her head. Suddenly, 2 students from the university start quarreling, and an intense fight breaks out between them. Before Alan could even reach the spot, a handsome boy in white robes intervenes in the fight and asks both parties to calm down. When none of them listen to him, he uses ice magic and turns both the students into ice stones. He notices Alan and Iruka watching from a distance and waves toward them. Suddenly, he disappears and magically appears again in front of Charlotte. He introduces himself as Harvey Crawford, who is also the father of Iruka and Alan, and Charlotte greets him. Then the whole group visits the house, and Harvey praises Alan for bringing such an adorable girlfriend with him. Before Alan could tell him the truth, Iruka pokes him under the table and hints for him to put up the act. Alan realizes that Iruka has prepped their parents about Alan's girlfriend to avoid unnecessary intervention and plays along. Everyone, along with Charlotte, reads the room and puts up the act of them being a lovely couple. Charlotte formally introduces herself again as being in a relationship with Alan, who teaches her naughty things. Lou begins to get jealous of Alan and tries to tell the truth, but Ghostsu knocks him down. Harvey tells Charlotte to think of him as her father and to rely on him whenever she needs help. Harvey tells both of them to marry each other and get settled down. Once they settle down, he will leave the Magical Academy in the hands of Alan and retire peacefully. Alan refuses the offer bluntly and tells him that he would keep his current residence as his forever home. Ghostsu asks him why he rejected such a prestigious offer of being headmaster of the largest university in the world, and Alan replies that it would be baggage he does not want to be tied down by. Suddenly, Alan's mother enters the room with snacks, where Charlotte mistakes her for Alan's younger sister and greets her formally. Alan tries to clear the misconception and describes her as his aunt, but a fork comes flying and passes from a hair's distance from his neck. She gives a death glare to Alan and asks him whether he has forgotten how to address her in 3 years. This terrifies the life out of Alan, and he begins calling her mother instead of aunt. She introduces herself as Lyslot Crawford, who is the mother of Alan. Alan tells everyone that his uncle wants him to take over the university so that he can be with Liz all the time. Harvey accepts it and tells him that he loves Alan so much that he wants to give him a new little brother or sister. Alan gets embarrassed and tells him to stop, as it is too graphic for him. They all sit down for tea, and Alan asks them to come to the main topic about Natalia. Harvey informs them that Natalia is currently studying in an abroad branch of Athena University. As the Evans family is in chaos right now, Natalia is seeking refuge in the university under the pretense of studying abroad. 3 months ago, she took admission there with a fake identity, and the management recently found out she is the younger sister of Charlotte. Harvey further continues that factional rivalries are increasing day by day in the university, and Charlotte starts to worry about Natalia. But her worry reduces to ashes when Harvey shows them the current state of the university using a magical mirror. They find out that Natalia is now the leader who reigns over top of the factions in the university. She used to be sweet and caring previously, but due to some hidden circumstances, she turned into a completely different person. Although she is still a kind-hearted person who takes care of her underlings, she has gone too far that they have to intervene before she completely becomes a tyrant. Harvey asks Alan to persuade Natalia to hold back a little and attend class more seriously. Alan agrees and asks to leave those troublemakers to him. They decide to give a visit to Natalia the next day and have a little talk with her. The discussion ends and Liz asks all of them to rest peacefully in their rooms. Alan tries to leave the home with an excuse, but Liz suggested him to stay here because of Charlotte's safety, and he finally agrees after some ifs and buts. She shows the room to them, and Alan gets flustered when he sees a single bed in the room. Alan's mother threatens him if he is lying to her about being a couple and to save his neck, He ends up on the same bed with Charlotte. Alan tries to put his deadly down spell, but it won't work. He tried it again, and it failed this time also. He realizes that the bed is made up of materials with magic disabling properties, and the only person that could have done so is none other than Iruka. Alan's and Charlotte's heart started pondering, and they started thinking about their relationship with each other. After a bit of non-conclusional overthinking, both of them say goodnight to each other and go to sleep. Iruka gets a heartbreak as she don't get any entertainment which she was expecting while spying on them. She gets a bit overboard and starts creating a ruckus, but gets immediately humbled down when a fork comes flying straight to her from Liss. The next morning, both of them woke up with dizzy eyes. They prepare for the university and Alan casts a disguising spell named Shape Shift, which changes her appearance completely. They reach the academy and find Natalia near a fountain. Alan approaches her, but she gets cautious and prepares for a fight along with her underlings. Alan introduces himself as Alan Crawford and praises her for learning this much in just 3 months. Her underlings started trembling in pants and described Alan as the great demon lord who annihilated the whole mountain single-handedly during his fight with the headmaster. Alan asks them to stop and introduces Charlotte to Nat as her assistant, who is here due to the request of the headmaster. He presented himself as her private instructor and asked for her cooperation, but Natalia refused to do so and left the place. Alan follows her to the classroom where he gets impressed by her immense knowledge about magic. He asks her to teach some magic to Charlotte, which she initially refuses, but finally agrees after seeing the enthusiasm in Charlotte. She teaches the basics of lightning magic to Charlotte and comes outside for practice. In the meantime, Lou and Ghostsu enters with lunch and Natalia gets shocked after seeing a Fenrir and Capybara at the same time. She asks Charlotte who she is in reality and finds out about her extraordinary taming abilities. Later, all of them sit down for lunch and Charlotte notices how Nat is just taking junk food for her diet. Alan asks about her sister Charlotte, but Nat grows silent and asks him never to talk over this topic again. Suddenly, another fraction of students led by a boy named Chris enters the cafeteria. He tries to provoke Natalia, but she calms her down by telling him to take an appointment first to even have a conversation, let alone having a duel. As they were leaving the cafeteria, a subordinate of Chris ran into Charlotte and she fell on the ground. Charlotte apologized to them, but they started humiliating her. Nat rushes for her support and beats up 2 of his men. Chris and his men gang up on her and Natalia also prepares to fight them. But Alan intervened them from behind and asks Natalia to step back. Natalia questions Alan for not even standing up for her assistant and forgiving them. Alan replies that who has forgiven them and activates a subspace barrier magic. He asks Natalia to observe him carefully if she wants to actually learn how to fight. The group of boys attack Alan and he knocks them down in an instant. Then he binds them using his magical spells and activates his highest level destructive spell to make them repent on how they have behaved with Charlotte. As he prepares his magic ball to hit them, Charlotte attacks him with her lightning magic and dismantles his magic along with the subspace barrier. She tells Alan that it's not such a big deal that they have to punish them to such an extent and scold him. Later, in the garden, Natalia has a conversation with Alan where they commend Charlotte for successfully learning lightning magic in such a small time frame. They discuss their future plans where Nat expresses her desire of getting stronger and Alan motivates him to do so and asks her to take over this university with her powers. The next day, Iruka joins them and finally meets Natalia. Natalia says Iruka must be an established sorcerer herself, but Iruka humbly replies that she has not accomplished anything like her elder brother yet. Natalia asks what they are doing there, and Alan explains his whole plan about letting Natalia take over the university. He outlines that Natalia has to outperform everyone across different areas, whether in the classroom, magical experiments, or contests, to prove herself a worthy leader. After that, they will challenge Natalia's only remaining rival, Chris, in a dungeon trial. In the dungeon, they must retrieve a flag from its deepest point, and the first one to exit with it will be the winner. Alan shows Natalia a secret path, and she successfully clears the dungeon in just 30 minutes. This defeat humiliates Chris deeply, and he leaves with a vow to make her pay for it. Later, Natalia points toward a restricted dungeon and asks why it is off-limits. Iruka explains that the dungeon boss is extremely agitated because it is her laying season. Alan assigns Ghostsu as the trainer for Natalia's underlings, believing they also need to be strong to support her in the future. They undergo rigorous training under his supervision, and Natalia thanks Alan for doing it for her. Ghostsu and the trainees leave for training, and the rest of the group heads to the cafeteria for dinner. In the cafeteria, Charlotte forcefully feeds green vegetables to Natalia and advises her to eat healthy instead of junk food. Alan notices how happy Charlotte seems now, acting like a real sister to Natalia. Natalia also enjoys Charlotte's company and asks if she would like to learn more spells, such as lightning magic. Charlotte happily agrees, and they decide to begin training early the next morning before class. Suddenly, Natalia's underlings come running and beg to be taught as well. Before anyone can respond, Gosu says it is a million years too early for those small fry to join them and drags them back for more training. Later that night, Alan carries a half-asleep Natalia into her room, which is filled with study notes and books. He places her on the bed and praises her dedication to studying. While looking around, he notices a bag sealed with magic and becomes curious. One of Natalia's friends explains that it is something very precious to her and that she does not allow anyone else to see it. Chris happens to pass by and overhears the conversation. Everyone else returns to their rooms, but Charlotte and Alan stay in Natalia's room. Alan asks Charlotte if she wants to reveal her identity to Natalia, but she decides against it. She is unsure how Natalia would react to a sister accused of treason and begins recalling sweet memories they once shared. Alan advises her not to overthink it. He says that time is the greatest healer and that eventually everything will fall into place. Until then, they will take care of Natalia from a distance. The next morning, Charlotte wakes up early and leaves for magic training with Natalia. Natalia teaches her various spells, and Charlotte masters each one perfectly. After the session, they take a break, and Charlotte thanks her for teaching her. Natalia becomes a little emotional and starts recalling some old memories. She invites Charlotte to her room, saying she wants to show her something. Once they reach the room, Natalia searches for her bag, but cannot find it. Instead, she finds a letter from Chris on the table, challenging her to a duel in the restricted dungeon. He demands that she come alone if she wants her bag back. Natalia immediately rushes toward the dungeon. Some time later, when Charlotte does not return, Alan begins looking for her and runs into members of Chris's group. As he is about to leave, they tell him the entire situation. Chris has summoned Natalia to the Forbidden Dungeon, and they ask Alan for help. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, Alan hurries to the dungeon. Inside the dungeon, Natalia and Chris face off with each other where Chris explains the rules of the duel. He casts a protective spell on the bag and throws it deep into the dungeon. He gives one condition: the first to retrieve the bag from the bottom and return will be the winner. The contest begins, and both of them rush down into the dungeon. After a tense race, Natalia manages to take the bag and demands Chris to accept his defeat. Before they can conclude their argument, a monstrous chimera appears in front of them. Both of them run and hide beneath a rock. Just when they think they are safe, the chimera appears above them and tries to devour them. Chris tells Natalia to stay back, taking responsibility for dragging her into this situation. He attacks the chimera with a spell, which momentarily forces it to back off. However, instead of fleeing, the beast becomes more furious and begins attacking more fiercely. It fires a magical beam at Natalia, which injures her severely. She falls to the ground and the chimera approaches her. Just as it is about to strike her down, Charlotte appears and attacks it with lightning magic. The blast hits the chimera directly, forcing it to retreat. Charlotte takes both Chris and Nat under the shelter and ties a handkerchief over her wounds to stop the bleeding. Nat asks her why she is here, as it is dangerous. Charlotte tells her she was very much worried about her, as no matter how strong she is still a small child. Natalia shows her bag to him and says it is something very precious to her. Something that holds a part of her past she cannot let go of. She asks if Charlotte knows about the incident with the Evans family, and Charlotte nods as she says her sister committed a terrible crime, but Natalia shakes her head and refuses to believe it, calling it nothing more than a false accusation because her sister would never even hurt a bug, let alone do something so awful. She believes the prince must have set something up, some kind of trap that forced her sister into that situation. And even after that, the Evans family turned their backs on her and left her no choice but to run away in order to stay alive. Charlotte asks if she hates her sister for what happened, but Natalia tells her not to say such dumb things, because the only person she truly hates is herself. And ever since she was born, her sister had been the one who took care of her, who always treated her with kindness, but one day, she saw that same sister in a helpless, broken state that completely shattered her heart, and even then, she couldn't do anything to help. That moment stuck with her, and she promised herself that one day she would be strong enough to protect her. but now she can only regret the fact that she never made it in time. After her sister disappeared, everything she owned was thrown away, and the only things that survived were what Natalia managed to keep inside this bag. And it is because of this bag that she feels a connection, something that tells her her sister is still alive somewhere. She tried to use magic to find her, but every time she casts a spell, it gets blocked by a force stronger than her own. So she came to one conclusion, that someone out there, some twisted pervert, has her sister locked away, and whoever it is has been blocking her spell on purpose. That is why she is preparing to crush the bastard who took her sister from her. Charlotte listens and slowly realizes that Natalia has misunderstood everything. She thinks someone kidnapped her sister, but Charlotte now understands the truth. The only person who could have blocked that spell is Alan, and Natalia has been chasing nothing but his shadow. Natalia tells Charlotte that she will become strong, and that one day, she will find her sister. She adds that every time they talk, she catches a glimpse of her sister in Charlotte's words and expressions. Nearby, Chris overhears their conversation and starts crying as he apologizes for being such a burden during a time when Charlotte was carrying such a heavy past. But just as things begin to settle between them, the ground trembles and the dungeon master appears in front of them. It turns out to be a salamander, and Chris immediately starts panicking. Charlotte quickly comes up with a plan and tells Chris to take Natalia and escape since her leg is injured and she cannot move fast. The salamander charges at them and releases a wave of blazing fire from its mouth. Charlotte counters it with her lightning magic, but it does nothing to stop the beast. The impact is too much, and she collapses onto the ground as her magical disguise fades. That is when Natalia realizes that Charlo is actually her long-lost sister, Charlotte. Before she can run to her, the salamander closes the distance and unleashes another fire blast. And just when all hope seems lost, Alan steps in front of the flames and blocks the attack with a single strike. The salamander, now furious, unleashes its full strength, but Alan easily counters it using his dark magic. For the first time, Chris and Natalia witness the overwhelming power of the great demon lord, and the entire island begins to shake under the pressure of his magic. A fierce battle erupts, but no matter how many times the beast attacks, Alan blocks it effortlessly without breaking a sweat. Then, in the middle of the chaos, the salamander suddenly changes its behavior. It stops attacking and starts acting strangely affectionate toward Alan, who casually begins patting it on the head. Chris and Natalia watch in utter confusion, unsure of what is happening. That is when Alan's mother, Liz, arrives and introduces the salamander as Pachai. She explains that Alan raised it ever since it was an egg, and that it sees him as its father. After calming the creature down, they all leave the cave safely. Chris apologizes to the headmaster for entering the dungeon without permission, and the headmaster tells him that since he has learned his lesson, he will let it go this time. Charlotte finally regains consciousness, and as she opens her eyes, she sees Natalia standing beside her. Charlotte apologizes for causing trouble because she ran away from the palace, but Natalia just brushes it off like it is no big deal. To confirm if Charlotte is really her sister, Natalia asks what picture book they used to study together when they were kids, and Charlotte tells her about the one with stories about the zoo. She says she lost it somewhere, but Natalia surprises her by pulling that exact book out of her bag because she had kept it safe all this time. Natalia gets emotional and asks Charlotte to read it again just for her, and that moment creates a wave of emotions between the two sisters, and they hug each other while tears roll down their faces. Later in the evening, as they are about to leave, Natalia thanks Alan for saving her sister. She then asks about their relationship, but before Alan can say anything, Ghostsu and Lou step in and reveal that those two are dating. Alan does not even get a chance to blush before Natalia suddenly unleashes her magic and attacks him while shouting that he is the reason she could not find her sister using magic for so long. She yells that Alan must have approached her sister with perverted thoughts, and she blasts him with magic even before he can explain anything. The whole university watches their great demon lord run for his life from a tiny girl who looks absolutely furious, and somehow the day ends without any real damage. A few days later, Alan and Charlotte are relaxing peacefully at their mansion when Miyacha jumps in through the window like that is her usual entrance. She hands Alan an unnamed parcel, and he opens it to find a strange card with a magical circle. As he pours magic into it, a portal suddenly opens and Natalia jumps out of it and lands right on top of Alan before greeting her sister like nothing happened. Iruka and Mia explain that it was all part of a surprise, and Natalia quickly asks about the demon lord. Everyone points at the ground and tells her that he is buried beneath her feet, and Alan stands up looking totally defeated. Natalia says he is still alive, so she will finish the job properly this time, and the sparks between them ignite again. Just before the chaos begins, the door bangs open and hits Alan in the face, knocking him behind it again. Dorothea walks in and starts asking Alan for help, and he stands up only to be handed a romance novel as a thank you gift for helping her last time. She then casually asks if there has been any progress between Charlotte and him since her editor is already asking for a sequel to the story. Suddenly, everyone in the room starts cheering and begging them to confess their feelings once and for all, and the place turns into a full-blown love drama. When night falls, they all sit together for dinner like one big family, and after that everyone heads off to sleep. But Charlotte cannot fall asleep, so she steps into the hallway and finds Alan still awake. He grins and asks if she is ready for something naughty again, and she nods with curiosity. Alan leads her to the garden where they drink hot chocolate and stare at the stars. They talk about different constellations and the kind of magical energy they might hold, and Alan jokingly calls it a naughty activity that only works at night. While chatting, he accidentally places his hand on Charlotte's and both of them freeze. As he tries to pull his hand back, Charlotte gently holds onto it, and they both sit there blushing while staring up at the sky. Charlotte quietly thanks him for everything and tells him that lately she has been looking forward to every morning just so she can see him again. She says she is really glad they met, and as she talks, her blanket slips off. Alan leans forward to cover her so she does not catch a cold, and their faces end up so close that a kiss seems inevitable. But just before it happens, Alan stands up and yells for everyone to come out. Charlotte turns bright red when she realizes the whole group had been hiding and watching them. They all come out with disappointed faces because they missed the kiss. Natalia wastes no time and accuses Alan of manipulating her sister since they were holding hands, and once again the two prepare for a battle. And so another day ends. But this one feels special because Charlotte finally lets go of her sadness and learns how to enjoy life again. She finds real friends and a loving sister and people who care for her, along with someone who always stays by her side. And the night ends not with conflict or chaos, but with peace and quiet happiness blooming under the stars. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and watch the video on your screen next.